Hello, good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to give you a talk on CFTR modulators in the Czech Republic. So thanks to organizers and to Dorota for this. Although this is a scientific session, there wouldn't be that much of science. What I understand and what's clear from the title, I would love to share with you the experience in Czech Republic in terms of introduction of CFTR modulators into the CF population in our country. I feel very sad that I can't be with you in person, that we can't meet each other and talk more and more about our shared experience. So let's say that this is more or less the introduction, and hopefully next year we will have the opportunity to talk more about it, and that COVID times will be out. All right. So this is my disclosure, and I thank Jane so much that she made a very clear and nice presentation on the therapeutic pipeline with the CFTR modulators. So the recent history of the therapy of CF, the timeline over the last 8 years, when the history with modulators started in 2012, and the first in-class drug of CFTR modulators called Kalydeco, which is its brand name, the molecule inside is called ivacaftor, was marketed. 3 years later, it's been the first dual combination of the potentiator ivacaftor and the corrector lumacaftor with the brand name of Orkambi. 3 years later, in 2018, there was a replacement of lumacaftor with tezacaftor with another corrector, and the drug called Simkevi was approved for the use in both US and in Europe. And 2019, a big change, and the first triple combination was approved in the US by FDA. In 2020, it happened in European Union, approval by EMA, so it's 2019 or 2020 for European Union, that ivacaftor, tezacaftor, elexacaftor, this three combination with its brand name Kaftrio in the European Union has entered the market. So as I said at the beginning, that I would like to share with you our experience. So first of all, I would like to show you how many eligible patients actually we have in our population, how we identify the eligible patients. And in the next part of my talk, I will try to give you some hints how we actually secure the access to the therapies to our patients. So I wanted to avoid this very busy slide and prepare the animation to go step by step. Unfortunately, we've got everything in one single slide, so I'll try to navigate you and to explain a little bit more what you can see on the slide. So there are different groups of patients, and of course, those 4 CFTR modulators covering different subgroups based on the indication criteria, which are basically the age of patients and their genotype. So let's start from the left bottom side with the Kalydeco. Kalydeco, the drug with ivacaftor, which is on the market from 2012. Altogether in the Czech CF population, we have 23 eligible patients, and we used to say we have 23 because they've got the single mutation called Celtic mutation or G551D. A few years ago, we had another patient with another class 3 mutation, another than Celtic mutation. So now we call it class 3. So patient with class 3 mutations. And we also split this group between 2. One of them is patients who have class 3 mutation, but no F508, no delta mutation on the other allele. And the other part of this group are the patients who have class 3 mutation on one allele and delta on the other allele. And we split this intentionally, and you can see that there will be probably, and I will explain later on, some overlap with the possibility to treat such patients not only with Kalydeco, but also with Kaftrio. The age parameter means that Kalydeco is now indicated for patients who are 6 months old and older, but the parameter of 12 years old needs to be taken into account if we consider that some of the patients can be treated with other drugs. And already you can see from this picture that there will be, again, overlap with Kaftrio, which I will explain a little bit later on the next slide. So that's the situation with Kalydeco. The situation with Orkambi is pretty simple because Orkambi can be used and can be indicated for a single group of patients in the context of their genotype. It's only the patients who have genotype delta delta. But we split these patients among 3 age subgroups, 2 to 5 years, 6 to 11, and above 12 years of age. And again, because there are some changes over the time, that the indication criteria can go to the younger and younger age groups. Simkevi, as the third drug, which was marketed, has the similar indication in terms of patients with the genotype delta delta and their age threshold 12 years and above. But as Jane explained, there is also the responsive group of patients who have the genotype delta and residual function. So we can see that there is in the middle group of patients with delta delta and with the age of 12 and older that can be actually treated by either Orkambi or Simkevi. And interestingly, if we look at the Simkevi indications, there is a discrepancy between indication approved by FDA and indications approved by EMA. And this discrepancy means that FDA approved the use of Simkevi also for patients who don't carry delta but have residual functional mutation in their genotype. So when we look at our national data, we've got 16 patients who actually have this sort of genotype, no delta, but residual function. And it's not a negligible subgroup of patients, so we also consider them to be treated by Simkevi, although they don't fit the official criteria approved by EMA. And I will explain if it's possible under the Czech legislation or not to treat those patients with off-label Simkevi. And last is Kaftrio. Kaftrio, who can be used for the treatment of patients with at least one delta allele. So once again, the center group of patients with delta delta can be covered by Kaftrio, so not only Orkambi or Simkevi, but also Kaftrio. And there is an additional subgroup of patients who have a single delta, and on the other allele, other mutation, other than delta. There is a specification that it's not residual function or G551D, and of course it's from practical reasons. Otherwise, we would double the number of patients because patients with residual function are already mentioned in the Simkevi subgroup, and patients with Celtic mutations are already covered by Kalydeco subgroup. I put there the title near future. What I explained so far is the current situation, but in near future, this graph will be redrawn because Simkevi is soon to be indicated for patients with who are younger than 12 years of age, so from 6 to 11. So we can see in our national data that we have 3 more patients with the residual function mutation who are below 12. And also because the age threshold would go down to the 6 years, Simkevi can also cover the homozygotes delta-delta patients who are 6 to 11 years. This is not the end of the near future changes of the graph because we just heard of the new data from the study 445104, which was focusing on patients with delta mutation and with G501D, or with delta mutation and residual function gene, so residual function mutation. And because the data show the efficacy of Kaftrio treatment for these two subgroups, so we can actually expand the group of patients who are eligible for the treatment of Kaftrio for near future. So it would go even further, and we've got this magic number of 333, so the number of eligible patients for the treatment with Kaftrio. So back to the current situation in September 2020. So the eligible patients for Kalydeco are 23, for Orkambi 82, plus 161. So this is the group of patients delta delta with their age 12 and above. Simkevi 33, 16 according to the FDA criteria only, and 161, which is the overlap with Orkambi. So either of the drugs work for them. And Kaftrio is, we can already count on that with as September 2020, because Kaftrio was approved for European Union. So we got another 130 patients treatable by this modulator drug. In total, we identified 445 patients within the Czech CF population to be eligible for the treatment with one or several of the modulator drugs, which counts for 66% or two-thirds of our population. It's not 90%, which is sometimes used in the presentations, that up to 90% of the population can be treated with modulator drugs, simply because the restriction of the age. It would look at the genotypes only and not take into the consideration the age of patients. It would end up with almost 90%. But now currently it's 66%. If we won't count Kaftrio, because it's really new within the modulator family, so we would have eligible 315 patients, which is almost 50% of populations to be treated with either Kalydeco or Orkambi or Simkevi. So that's why. So this is prerequisite. We need to know how many patients we actually have in the Czech Republic who fulfill the criteria for the treatment with modulators. But of course, more important is to find a way to secure the access to the therapy, to find a way how we actually can reimburse the treatment. So how a patient can get access to the CFTR modulators in the Czech Republic. So one of the options, of course, is the participation in one of clinical trials, but it's not, of course, the systemic solution of the situation. We know that late phase trials are highly competitive. It's international, so you simply cannot recruit or enroll all the eligible patients to clinical trials. So this is only a very small fraction of patients who can get early access to the therapy thanks to their participation in trials. So more importantly, we have to find resources within the public health budget. In Czech Republic, the legislation allows us to use one of three ways. The most straightforward, which works for the most of the drugs, but unfortunately not for orphan drugs, is the permanent reimbursement once the drug shows that it's cost effective and the budget impact is not that high. So then the regulators and the insurance companies would agree that they set the price and they can start reimbursement for the drug forever. It's not the case for orphan drugs, and it's not usually the case in other countries in the European Union either. Because of the orphan drugs and their impossibility to fit within the very strict criteria of cost effectiveness, that the price is not that high, our Act on the National Health Insurance was updated in 2001 and created the possibility of temporary reimbursement. Temporary reimbursement means that the drug can be reimbursed for the period of 3 years at maximum, and during that time, we, as physicians, have to prove that the drug is cost effective. So, in practical terms, it means that it gives us 3 years, but after those 3 years, we hardly prove the cost effectiveness in a very small subgroup of Czech patients. So, what I can say, the temporary reimbursement was approved for Kalydeco 2 years ago in Czech Republic, and we are a little bit stuck and unsure what happens next. We know that there is a change of law underway, but if it will be done by the end of temporary reimbursement, we are not completely sure, and that's a very, of course, uncomfortable situation for patients who are already on Kalydeco. The third current way how we can actually get reimbursement for individual cases is the very mysterious paragraph 16, individual exceptional reimbursement, and I will show you what this paragraph 16 says. It says that the health insurance companies can pay in exceptional circumstances if the treatment is the only therapeutic option in regard to the health condition of a patient, and it applies to situations when the drug is not systematically reimbursed in that country. So, of course, it actually applies to all modulator drugs in Czech Republic except for Kalydeco. And when you read this sentence again and again, you can imagine that it's subject to different interpretation and a big discussion between insurance companies, patients, and hospitals and CF doctors, because we can see that modulators are actually the only therapeutic options. But insurance companies can say, no, it's not the only therapeutic option. You've got already the symptomatic treatment, patient is in relative good state, so the paragraph 16 is not applicable to your instances. So that's very frustrating that we actually have to fight for each single patient and try to persuade the insurance companies that paragraph 16 is applicable to patients. So when we look back to the timeline from beginning of 2012, so I would just show you with the different drugs which ways of the reimbursement are now reality. For Kalydeco, we started in actually 2009 with clinical trial. So first 3 patients were put on Kalydeco or on ivacaftor thanks to the clinical trial. The first successful submissions and requests for individual 16 happened in 2014. And in 2018, we finally got the approval with the temporary reimbursement, but only for subgroup of patients who are 6 years and older and who have the Celtic mutation. So you can see from this timeline that it took us 5 or 6 years of very harsh negotiation with regulators to get at least the temporary reimbursement. But things are getting better, at least from the perspective of the time delays. With Orkambi, Orkambi was introduced on the market in 2015, but we already had some patients participating in clinical trials since 2013. And first individual paragraph 16 requests were approved in 2018. But the majority of cases started to be approved in 2020, and I will explain in a minute why it happened. With Symkevi, no clinical trial was open in Czech Republic, and in 2020, we managed to get quite a substantial number of patients on Symkevi through the paragraph 16, and I will explain why. because this is the same for Orkambi as for Simkevi, thanks to a great change of attitude and the change of environment in the major insurance company, which asked us actually for negotiation and for discussion. Our CF working group, our national working group, made a statement that we really need to put patients on treatment with Orkambi or Simkevi as early as possible. And luckily, healthcare payers listened to us and they started to talk about it. So in December 2019, we made a common agreement between the physicians and the healthcare payers for each of the drug, for ivacaftor with lumacaftor, and for ivacaftor with tezacaftor, and specified the patients who really should be on the drug through the paragraph 16, because there is no systemic reimbursement. Paragraph 16 is the only way, and the insurance companies listened to us and were very collaborative and very proactive. So that's how it worked in 2020. With Kaftrio, we really hope that we will actually copy the situation from 2019, and we will get once again the agreement on the early access to Kaftrio. Actually, later today, we will have a second already in a row negotiation, or the second in a row meeting with the insurance company in the context of Kaftrio and its early access. So these are the ways how we can find the way for reimbursement. Actually, how successful we are will be shown on the next slide. So how many patients are on the therapy as for September 2020? Kaleido, all eligible patients are on the treatment thanks to the temporary reimbursement combined with paragraph 16 for patients who are younger than 6 years of age. For Orkambi, we have 73 out of 243 eligible patients on Orkambi. And you can see that the majority of cases are actually the children. So we've got almost half of children eligible for the treatment on the treatment with Orkambi. So we've got many more children than adults on Orkambi. And I can say why. Because in the 2019 agreement, we already knew about Kaftrio, and pre-agreement was that as soon as Kaftrio is on the market, we will put patients on Kaftrio. So actually, there was sort of compromise that adult patients not would be on the front line of indication for Orkambi or Simkevi. Simkevi was in that agreement determined there should be prioritized for patients who have the residual function genotype, residual function and delta genotype, because they won't be eligible for Kaftrio in 2020. So we had half of patients with the genotype delta and residual function on Simkevi within the year. So you can see that the paragraph 16 and the agreement was actually very rapidly fulfilled. We also, and that's a little bit of breakthrough, also managed to get the first patient on Simkevi based on the FDA criteria only. And the insurance company agreed to start the treatment. We also documented that single case with organoid results from the laboratory in vitro testing that such a patient is really responsive to Simkevi because of the residual function present in her genotype. So it doesn't mean that, or it's not necessary for our healthcare insurance to completely follow only the strict indication criteria given by EMA. For Kaftrio, we got only 6 patients on the treatment, and it's of course because of the clinical trial. But hopefully, some of the results of the negotiations from today and maybe in a few weeks' time could result in having the opportunity to have more patients on Kaftrio. So we have 23 patients on Kalydeco, 73 on Orkambi, 21 on Symkevi, 6 on Kaftrio. So when we put the data together, we have 28% of eligible patients on moderators already. I was surprised myself when I counted and when I put the numbers together, that it's quite a substantial number actually of patients who already benefit for the treatment. If we look on the data without Kaftrio, so without these 6 cases, and look only on the eligibility for Kalydeco or Orkambi or Symkevi, it's actually almost 40% of the eligible population to be on the moderators treatment. The last bit of my presentation would touch on the topic of our clinical experience with modulators. I won't go extensively to details, so what are our experience? I would just say for Kalydeco, because it's there for the longest period of time. We started in 2009, thanks to the clinical trial, and then of course we can follow those patients already for 10 years. We see what's been well described in the registration study and in follow-up studies, actually what Jane showed from the registry data of the US and UK. So we have very comparable experience that all patients, we had 4 patients on Kalydeco thanks to the clinical trial, and all 4 patients showed the rapid improvement in their FEV1 just after the beginning of therapy. And this was published in 2016 by one of the Czech medical journals. But if we look further to 10 years on therapy, patients have still very good FEV1 with almost no decline. So it's very stable and high FEV1 over the years. We can see high reduction in the number of hospitalization, so in the pulmonary exacerbations and the days of antibiotics when we compare the period before the beginning of Kalydeco treatment and once the patients are on Kalydeco. As for Orkambi, so these are very preliminary data. We don't have that many patients on the long-term Orkambi treatment, so there are just several of them who were participating in the clinical trial. All of these were adults. And we can see quite various change in FEV1. Some of them improved, some of them had more or less the same FEV1. So we will see once we can combine data and when we look on also on the younger population, so what's actually the benefit of Orkambi in terms of FEV1. Orkambi is sometimes, not sometimes, it's quite often actually mentioned with the context of the side effects. And when someone asks you, is better Symkevi or Orkambi to delta-delta patients, you get the answer that Symkevi is better because of their safety profile. That's for sure true. But our experience with Orkambi is not actually that bad. Out of those 70 patients who are on Orkambi, we had only 1 case of discontinuation because of this side effect. And that was a girl, the young lady, who participated on the Orkambi trial during the period of 2014 and 2016. And already during that time, she presented with liver enzymes elevation and with the creatine kinase elevation. You can see on these graphs that it was quite variable over the course of the clinical trial, and we didn't find the actual reason for this. So there was no clear explanation for this fluctuation. She was all the time on the drug, and you can see even she was on the drug, the liver enzymes went down and then went up again. After the trial, we watched her, of course, very closely, and there were again some episodes of elevations. And in December 2019, there was a steep peak in the ALT and a steep peak in the creatine kinase as well. So that was decided to stop the treatment of Orkambi. And as for now, she's got almost normal values of ALT and of the creatine kinase. So it's very likely her history with the liver enzymes, very likely in association with actually the treatment of Orkambi. So that's our single experience with this severe side effect that led to the discontinuation of the treatment with Orkambi. So in conclusion, what I would like to highlight is that we've got 37% of eligible patients already on the therapy with either Kalydeco, Orkambi, or Symkevi. And that's the result of very intense, and I must say, very productive, and I'm very grateful for that, productive negotiation with national healthcare payers who understood the situation and who listened to us and who proactively try to find a way how actually get patients on the treatment. CFTR modulators, it's a hugely dynamic environment. I wanted to illustrate this by the graphs and the changes of the eligible groups for the treatment with drug A, drug B, or drug C, or drug D. So there is almost 100% time spent by the data manager, someone who really looks after the national registry to see actually how many patients we've got for which treatment. And that's really important because healthcare payers would ask you, that would be their first question. So how many patients? So we need to very closely watch these changes with the age groups, genotypes, which new drugs can be on the market. There is also quite substantial administration burden because, for instance, for the temporary reimbursement, we are obliged to collect the data, as I said before, because based on the data, we should show the cost effectiveness of the treatment, although I must say that I have no idea how we can show actually the cost effectiveness. And paragraph 16 has to be renewed every 3 months. So with the number of patients, it's really lots of work, of the administrative work to renew, to think of it, and to put the request on time. So for all of these make working, you need a functional national registry, and of course the administrative support is absolutely essential. Thank you very much for your attention.